Hey guys, let's get straight into it. I'm just doing this to make a YouTube out of it so I can put in 2-speed. Okay. A gene is part of a DNA that codes for proteins. So very easy. Transcription is when you go from RNA to DNA, and RNA polymerase does this. Translation is from RNA to a strand of amino acids, which is proteins. So basically, um, so in transcription, we take our DNA, do base pairing. Before it leaves, we extract the introns, let the exons exit the nucleus to code for amino acids, and then that is called mRNA, a messenger RNA, which is the combining of exons. So exons can exit the nucleus, introns cannot. Exons can exit and go out to party and make proteins, whereas introns can't. Now, finally, this messenger RNA meets up with a ribosome. The ribosome reads the 3 bases, which are called a codon. The ribosome is basically a matchmaker, and it's like, hey, tRNA that's floating around, you have a good anticodon that would match up with these codons on mRNA, come over here. They match up, and that tRNA that's carrying an amino acid drops that amino acid off. Every time there's a matching, they drop off the amino acid, and the amino acids build up, making a pearl chain, and that is called, that chain is called a protein. On the left is a karyotype. If you scroll in, so these are homologous chromosomes, and say right here, like if we're looking at this point and this point, they're the same right arms of the twins. I like to call them the twins. If the twins have the same arm of the right twins, is it the same arm? No. Those are called alleles, though. It's the same part on their pair. Okay. And so DNA makes up genes, make up DNA, and DNA winds up tightly and makes a chromosome. Okay. Moving on. Okay, so we have 46 chromosomes. So that's every X on here. This is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Makes sense? But we have 23 pairs of chromosomes. So basically we have 23 twins. And the autosomes are the non-sex chromosomes. So the sex chromosomes are the ones that are highlighted, and that's the 23rd chromosome. If we have any effects that are happening on our autosomes, we're going to have more severe consequences than if we have chromosomal effects on our sex chromosomes. And this is a karyotype. They're just seeing what we know. So I'm going to go over this a bit. A locus is a location where a gene is. An allele is part of a chromosome. Let me go to it real quick. Feel so unprepared, guys. It's a different gene, a different version of a paired gene. So it's basically if I have a twin, say my twin has brown, we're identical. Well, we're twins, but she has brown hair and I have red hair. That's the difference. Difference on the same part. Okay, so genotype is your genetic makeup. So in your DNA, phenotype is the physical appearance that you demonstrate. Penetrance is if, say, I have a gene for acne, but I have super soft skin. That would be incomplete penetrance because I'm not expressing the acne gene. Now, expressivity is the variations of expressing a gene. So I have the gene for acne, but it can come in varies. Like I'm expressing the gene for acne, I can either have cystic, really bad acne, or I can have a pimple here and there. Both are acne, I'm expressing it, but sometimes it's less severe or more severe in expressing it. Multifactorial inheritance is basically when you get epigenetics coming into place, which we'll talk about in the next chapter, and that's affecting um, some of your genes. Yep, yep, yep. So euploid is good, aneuploid is not. So euploid is in 23s. So um, us that have a normal chromosomal setup, we have two sets of 23. So we have 46 chromosomes. Now there's some people who have 3 times 23, that's triploidy, and we have sometimes 4 times 23, that's tetraploidy. That's a lot of chromosomes. That's like, oh gosh, 92. Is it 92 chromosomes for tetraploidy? That's a lot. That's too much. And they're thinking that this could be a reason of miscarriage. Now, aneuploidy, that isn't a multiple of 23, but there's consequences with it. So I'm going to explain it a little bit. So say right here on 21, I have another chromosome saying right here. So there's 3 right here. It wouldn't be 20. I wouldn't have 46 chromosomes. I'd have 47. So it's not a multiple of 23. It's just an extra on one of the chromosome sets, on specifically 21. This would be called Down syndrome. Now, if I went over here and I took away this X, so I literally only have one X there, I would have 45 chromosomes altogether, just one X. So scratch this one right here. That would be monosomy, and that specifically is Turner syndrome. Now, keep in mind that autosomal, chromosomal, so chromosomal effects on the autosomes are more severe than if there was defects on the sex chromosome. And also, so if you have just one, you would have more effects than having 3. So you would rather have more than less. The overall goal is to have the normal 46, of course, but if you had to choose, I would rather choose having 3 on a chromosome than just 1. So monosomy has more severe effects. And trisomy and monosomy are known from non-disjunction. That's Gregor-Mendel, Punnett square. Easy. I'm pretty sure we started learning that in middle school. Down syndrome is trisomy 21. And they have a lower IQ. The females can still reproduce. So we want to star that because Professor said that quite a bit. Males are mostly sterile, but females can still reproduce. So we got to be careful with that. Oftentimes they're short, low nasal bridge, big tongue, low ears, epiconythal folds, so different type of eye folds, poor muscle tone, congenitive heart disease they're prone to Alzheimer's, happens 1 in 800, and there's been like suggestions that an older mother could have caused this because their eggs are getting a little older. Now, this is monosomy of the X chromosome, so here we are on the sex chromosomes. So anytime we're dealing with sex chromosomes, we're going to have sex characteristics that differ. So if you're dealing with a 23rd chromosome abnormality, you're probably dealing with some major sex characteristic alterations. So In Turner syndrome, only females have this. Web neck, wide nipples, narrow aorta, foot edema, sterile. It's on the 23rd chromosome. Hint, hint, sex chromosome. Um, they do not have ovaries, and since they don't have ovaries, they can't have a period. So amenorrhea, no no period. Short, no breast, and have oftentimes have renal and heart issues. Now, if you have a little baby girl, you shouldn't be pointing fingers at the father because this oftentimes is inherited to the mom. Well, not oftentimes, it is inherited from the mother. So it's really hard to say, but likes to say to someone, but if a mother was like, "How did she get this? It must have been from her father's side because I have no one on my side that has this." You can be like, "Well, it's inherited from the mom, so yeah." Oops. Okay, Klinefelters. This is Polysomy X. So they're still a male, but they have multiple X's. So they can either have two X's or three X's. The more X's, the more severe. Um, they're sterile. They have breast formation, high pitched voice, female characteristics, sparse body hair, small testes, and long limbs. They get testosterone in puberty because those small testes, if we go over endocrine system, testosterone comes from our testes. They have small testes. We're not getting much testosterone. So we need to amp it up and give them testosterone in puberty. Okay? Pretty easy. Single trait disorders, just know that these are something that can be passed down from your parents. These are different than chromosomal disorders. Chromosomal disorders, like you cannot get Down syndrome from your parents. It's not like a genetic trait that you can get from your parents. That's just a mishap of havoc that happened during the whole meiosis phase of making the cell. Single gene traits come from parents, like cystic fibrosis and all of that. That's something that can be inherited. And there's three classifications: autosomal dominant, recessive, and X-linked. Autosomal dominant, no 50%. Autosomal recessive, no 25%. You need two affected genes for recessive, only one for dominant. Skipping down to X-linked. Oh, also looking at this, the squares are males and the circles are females, and the shaded in is who's affected. Skipping over that, this should be pretty easy by now because we did this. Just know to really read on the test what's going on here because there can be issues that arise if you don't really read it carefully. X-linked, like color blindness, that's where you get a mutation on the X chromosome. Now, in females, we have two X chromosomes. So we can have, if we have a mishap on one, we can have our other one take over and we won't be affected, but we'll be a carrier. However, males, they only have one X chromosome to rely on. So if they get a mishapped one passed down from their mom, they're more susceptible to having that disorder because they only have one to rely on. Males get it more, but this does not mean females don't get it. Females can still get it, okay? Um, but it's not as often. Okay, now reoccurrence risk is the probability that it will be passed down. So, you know, cystic fibrosis is a recessive. There's a 25% chance, gain a recessive trait unless both are carriers. That may make a difference. But okay, let's stick with like, what are they using? Like dominant, 50%. Just basically do the Punnett square and associate it with if it's a recessive or dominant, and any of the shaded squares that shows it's affected. Um, yeah, just note that you need 2 lower cases to have an affected recessive, and you only need 1 dominant for an affected dominant trait. Penetrance is the percent of an individual with a specific genotype. So like I was saying earlier, if I have a gene, the me showing that gene um, would be penetrance. So I'm showing the gene penetrance. However, I could have a gene in my body that I'm not expressing. That would be incomplete penetrance. So my phenotype isn't aligning with my genotype. Expressivity, this is like what I said with the acne, different variations of acne. So you can be expressing acne, the gene of acne, but it can be just slightly moderate, just a few pimples on the chin, or it can be severe cystic acne. Sex limited. This is pretty self-explanatory. It can only happen in one gender. I personally cannot get testicular cancer. I know that for fact because I don't have testicles. Now, sex influenced, that means it happens more often in one gender, and that is breast cancer. Like, we just see it, breast cancer, a lot more in females. Pedigree analysis is just seeing, like, it's basically like a family tree, seeing how it passed down and where it came from and what's going on and what caused it. And just know, see how there's 2 lines right here? You know what this means? This means they're cousins. And this has a special term called consanguinity, and that's just a long term for incest. So these were cousins that were mating and they made trouble. Okay, gene mapping is like, I want to see if Shelby has cystic fibrosis. Let's go ahead and take some of her DNA, look at the genes, and we can zoom in and see if it's um, she has cystic fibrosis. So this one was cystic fibrosis. They would like look into it and be like, oh yeah, looks like she has cystic fibrosis. So it's basically just there so they can um, look more into seeing if your like actual chromosomes show that you have a disorder. Now we have multifactorial inheritance. So this is basically the effect environment has on you expressing your genes. So personally, my family is very susceptible to breast cancers. The females are. So since I have, I mean, I just expect that I have a very low threshold for it. Keep in mind, we all have breast cancer genes. It's just a matter of fact, if we cross that threshold, that makes it expressed. So, um, I, I, I personally don't take hormonal birth control. I take the non-hormonal because hormonal birth control can cause breast development, and um, more tissue mass in the breast can and especially with hormones, it can wreak havoc, and it can cause me to cross the threshold and boom, breast cancer. So I just stay away from it just because I don't want to cross it. There's many girls who can take hormonal birth control for years and never cross it just because they have a high threshold. Um, it's basically like pain. Some people have a high threshold for pain, so they don't express pain. Some people have low. You just pinch them and bam, they're crying. Okay, this is easy questions, but so basically, just going to read off some definitions from the practice book. different version of a paired gene is an allele, a substance that alters genetic material, mutagen, a chromosome that is not a sex chromosome, autosome, segment that is a basic unit of inheritance, gene, three nitrogenous bases, codon, non-coding segment that's spliced out of mRNA, introns, alternation of DNA being capable to be passed on, mutagen, or not mutagens, mutation, segment of mRNA that does code for protons, that would be exons, and strands condensed condensed chromatin, that's chromosomes. So difference between monosomy and trisomy, one has three, one has one. Genotype and phenotype. Geno is genetic makeup, phenotype is physical. Mitosis and meiosis. So mitosis, you're going from a diploid cell to a diploid cell. So you're just like making an exact copy. Meiosis, however, is when you go from a diploid cell to a haploid. So diploid cell is when you have 46 chromosomes. Haploid is when you have 23 chromosomes. Not 23 pairs, 23 chromosomes. You only have 23 chromosomes in those sex cells because the point of it is to meet up with, so my sex chromosome 23 meets up with a male's sex chromosome 23, and then those come together and make 46 to hopefully make a zygote and a baby. Just know single single gene disorders can be passed down. Chromosomes are like caused in havoc that happen back in meiosis. So Down syndrome isn't something that can be like passed down from mom and dad, you know. I guess it could if you're like talking about like mess ups in the haploid cells, but it's all mess up in the chromosomes themselves, not the specific genes of the chromosome. Okay. Um, moving on to types of DNA mutations, base pair substitution is when you pair them wrong. You can get missense that makes a wrong amino acid, or nonsense that makes a stop codon, which is extremely bad because you could have like an 11 amino strand protein and only have 3 because on the third codon you messed up and oops, you made a stop codon and it's just ending there. So you get a shorter amino acid, shorter protein. Frame shift is insertion or deletion. So I like to think of this like when you're taking a test and you're filling in the bubbles on the Scantron. I've done this before where I missed one, like I forgot to fill one in after I got the answer, and then like all the answers after that were completely wrong because like all of the bubbles were shifted up one, or like if I did it, I accidentally bubbled the same answer twice and then I kept going. All the answers would be wrong after that. Euploid is in 23s. Aneuploid is having like monosomy or trisomy, not in 23s. Down syndrome. We went over this. Pedigree is like the family tree. So you're seeing where it's coming from. We went over penetrance, expressivity. Reoccurrence risk is the ability for it to pass down. So you're going to do, again, like a Punnett square. You're going to do like a Punnett square, and then you're going to, yeah, like see the affected and see what percent chance of your kid having that. Polygenetic is where you have multiple genes that make a certain trait. So basically, I want a peanut butter and jelly, but the only thing that I have in my pantry is bread. Like I cannot make a peanut butter and jelly. because you can't just do it with just bread. So same thing, like I would need in my chromosomal set, so just think instead of pantry, my chromosomal set, I would need to have peanut butter, jelly, and bread to make a PB&J. Okay. Multifactorial is the effect from the environment. I'm a little sick. All right. See y'all in the next chapter.